إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon the last and final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Over the last few sessions, we've discussed a few things concerning the intention system. The first thing we discussed is the inner process of intention making. To make an intention is much more than just knowing and doing. Many of us, when it comes to conducting a righteous action, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm going to enter into that action for reward, and then we move on. And through doing this, we're depriving ourselves of mountains worth of reward. And that's something we discussed in quite some depth, that there's an actual formula and an actual system to making the intention. And unless we identify the driving force, we understand why we're doing the action and what we're looking to gain through doing that action, the niyyah process itself, it's not materialized in an authentic manner. Then we talked about the realities of actions. The first lesson was about intentions. Then we moved on to discussing the essence of actions. And we said that all actions are categorized into three. What were they? Anyone remember? What were the three categories of actions? Permissible actions, forbidden. Permissible was in between. Mubah is permissible. Yeah, righteous actions, yeah? So we have the righteous actions, the sinful actions, and the permissible actions. So a righteous action is something you do with the sole purpose of gaining closeness to your Creator. Praying salah, giving in charity, fasting, praying voluntary prayers, reciting pages from the Quran. These are all righteous actions that we busy ourselves with the fundamental aim of growing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're rewarded for doing these actions. Sinful actions are those actions that we've been directly forbidden from doing. Backbiting, lying, cheating, consuming alcohol, consuming unlawful wealth. These are actions that the Islamic corpus has explicitly forbidden us from carrying out. And lastly, permissible actions. Who can give me some examples of permissible actions? Using a phone, very good. What else? Driving a car. These are things that as human beings we instinctively do. And nor are we rewarded for them, nor are we sinful for carrying out these actions. But we spoke in the previous session, how do we optimize these particular actions? How do we maximize the reward that we can gain through busying ourselves with these three categories? What we discussed is that a sinful action can never be transformed, but other actions, they can be transformed. So a sin remains a sin irrespective of how and when it's committed. But a righteous action can become a permissible action if the intention becomes void. So it transforms, it degrades. And a permissible action can be upgraded. It can become a righteous action if we have the correct intention. And we explored the heart-moving incident that took place between Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhuma. Well, Mu'adh, he explicitly mentioned that I sleep for a large portion of the night and I stand in prayer for a small portion of the night. And I perceive my reward for sleeping to be in line with my reward for standing in prayer. Meaning I'm rewarded for the entire night despite the fact that I just sleep most of the time. Why? Because he makes the intention that he sleeps with the primary aim of gaining energy to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. So when we eat and we drink and we get into our car and drive and we walk with the sole purpose of gaining closeness to Allah or doing something that's righteous and pious, then we gain reward for those actions. So we are here optimizing actions. We're transforming those instinctive things we do that are void of purpose and meaning into things that have purpose and meaning. Things that make our scale of good deeds way heavier when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can convert these daily habits into acts of worship and thereby drawing closer to Allah with every breath, every morsel of food and every small action. Today we're going to discuss the secrets of fasting. Okay. The month of Ramadan itself is directly associated with fasting. When we think of fasting, Ramadan comes to mind instantly. And the opposite is also true. When we think of Ramadan, the first thing that comes to mind is the act of fasting. There's a famous hadith Qudsi I want to share with everybody, and then we're going to collectively draw some lessons and virtues from this report. A hadith Qudsi is a report that the Prophet conveys to us that he's received via Allah directly himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that Allah said, كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصيام فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. Every deed of the son of Adam is for him, except fasting. It's for me, and I shall reward for it personally. I think we've all come across this report, but have we actually contemplated its meanings and virtues? Here, the Prophet ﷺ is conveying to us that all acts of worship have a stipulated reward, apart from fasting. If we pray, the reward is known. If we give in charity, the purpose and reward is known. If we're patient, to some degree the reward is known. But the only action that isn't just for us, it's for Allah Azza wa Jal, is the act of fasting. It's made distinctive, it's made unique and special. Why? Why is fasting unlike any other action? Here Allah is telling the Prophet, peace be upon him, everything human beings carry out in terms of righteous actions, they're fundamentally doing for themselves, for their own salvation, for their own protection. We pray because we don't want to be of those who abandon prayer. And as a result of that, they're punished. So why is it that fasting is different? It's not for us, it's for Allah. And He will personally reward the slave for fasting. What's the distinguishing factor? Anybody? What's so special about fasting that Allah is saying it's for me and every other deed is for the slave himself? He does it for his own benefit, his own protection and his own salvation. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. What are your thoughts, brothers, on this side? Team A is in the lead right now. Let's go to Team B. Okay, you're giving up something you need for survival, for the sake of Allah. Very good. What else? Brother Jamshed, you're in very deep thought. Share that deepness with us. The tea is downstairs, mashallah. That's what Idzar said. Okay, very good. Great minds think alike. Okay, what else, brothers? Any other thoughts? Why is fasting so special?
Is it something that was ordained for the people before us as well?
Okay, good, good. So, what makes fasting so special are two fundamental reasons that Imam Ghazali touches upon in this particular segment. And before he reveals the reasons why fasting is given such high regard, and it's something Allah personally rewards. And bear in mind, there's no act of worship that Allah has ever explicitly said He will personally hand the reward to His slave for, apart from fasting. That's what makes it so unique. It makes it so righteous, makes it so distinct. He says that the Prophet ﷺ said, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ بَابٍ. Every single thing has a door. Every action has a door. وَبَابُ الْعِبَادَةِ الصَّوْمِ. And the door to worship is fasting itself. So here, in this report, which Imam Ghazali is drawing from, he's saying that the essence of worship is fasting in and of itself. Every action, it has a door to it. And the door to worship all in all is fasting. And then he goes on to mention two primary reasons why fasting is something Allah will personally reward for. The first is what Idzaz mentioned, that fasting is secretive and unseen. That fasting in abstinence and restraint is a secret within itself, unlike any other act of worship. It's unseen by creation and only observed by Allah Ta'ala. And it's an internal act of pure patience. When you're fasting, what's unique about the sacrifice that we make throughout those days where we're fasting is we could potentially be eating in secrecy, but nobody will come to know of it. If you were feeling thirsty, you felt hungry, and you wanted some food, and you had food in your room, and then you came downstairs, there's no external signs through which people would come to know that you've broken your fast. Only you would know that you've broken your fast. So if you choose to fast, despite that this possibility is something that you could carry out, this elevates your rank and it elevates your station. And that's why it makes fasting a criterion to distinguish the faithful from the one who's void of faith and void of trustworthiness. So because fasting is intrinsically associated with secrecy, that's why Allah gave it such high importance. When it comes to prayer, we pray in congregation. Everybody knows we're in the mosque. Okay? We do our sunnah prayers. Our family members see us pray our sunnahs. Some of our family members may even know we're praying the voluntary prayers in the home. Yeah? A lot of when we build a mosque, we have to go through a charity. Somebody will come to know that such and such a person is giving money to have a mosque built in Uganda, for example. Yeah? When it comes to giving zakah, we have to go through legal means. Our details have to be disclosed. So every action has exposure. The only action that remains confidential, unseen, unhidden is the act of fasting itself. That's why Imam Ghazali mentions the first reason why it's so special, that Allah will free His schedule. Allah will make Himself available to personally give that reward, is because of the sheer secrecy involved with that action. Number two, fasting restrains the enemy more than any other action. So Imam Ghazali then touches upon how he said the human being has gateways. The same way everything valuable in this world has gateways. Yeah, whether it's a mansion, a museum, a house, a building, a bank. There are gateways, entry points, exit points. Okay? And each entry or exit point is protected and fortified to mitigate burglary, to mitigate theft, to mitigate violation, to mitigate crime, all in all. And he mentions the human being has a handful of gateway points. And he mentions he has his mouth, his hearing, his sight, his tongue, his private parts, his legs. These are the gateways of the human being. And each gateway is something shaitan has exploited and is currently exploiting. And the evidence for this is the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, shaitan runs through the human being the same way blood runs through his body. Nobody is more intimate with us than the devil himself. He understands our sensibilities, our capacities, our needs, our wants, our desires. So he mentions that these gateways, nothing fortifies them more than fasting. Nothing weakens the devil more than fasting itself. So he mentions fasting blocks the paths of shaitan and weakens his influence. And then he quotes the verse, if you support Allah, He will support you and make your feet firm. So these are the two reasons why fasting is so superior and it's given so much precedence. Number one, it's the deed that has ultimate secrecy. It's indicative of the slave's pureness and genuineness. And number two is nothing restrains the devil and fortifies the human pathways more than fasting. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he spoke to the youth of Medina, when he said that those of you who have the physical ability to marry, let them marry. And those of you who can't, let them fast. And then he said, فَالصِّيَامُ جُنَّةٌ, for fasting is a shield against all evil. We all know how raging the sexual desire is in youth. And the equivalent defensive mechanism that the Prophet informed the companions of to tame that desire was fasting itself. There's nothing else that comes close or on par with fasting when it comes to restraining the devil. Why do you think that is? Even from a logical perspective, why is it that fasting restrains the devil more than anything else?
Because he's denying food rather than anything else.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else?
Self-discipline.
Okay, what else?
You refrain from your desires.
Because the desires are the main pathway of shaitan anyway. Shaitan exploits all human beings through shahawat. The sexual desires they have, the lusts and the whims they have. So if you are completely closing yourself off from shahawat all in all because you're fasting, you are weakening the devil directly. There's a direct link between taming the shahawat and taming the devil himself. So nothing weakens a shaitan than starving him from a spiritual sense. This is a form of spiritual starvation. There are benefits of physical starvation and there are benefits of spiritual starvation. And spiritual starvation is where you prevent your limbs, your body parts from committing any sin. And as a result of this, the devil, he becomes weak, he becomes vulnerable. And you evict him from your pathways. And you fortify those gateways, preventing him from exploiting you and taking advantage of you. Then Imam Ghazali, he puts forth a thought-provoking question. He says, given that fasting has such a huge station in our religion, and given that fasting is the greatest shield against all forms of harm, so many Muslims fast on a yearly basis, particularly in the month of Ramadan. Does that mean every person who keeps the fast gains the merits, gains the virtues? Are all people who fast equal? What do you guys think? No. Why are all people who fast not equal?
Some people just gain hunger, thirsty. Others gain have that spiritual delight because they do more than just, I guess, starving themselves.
Okay, good. What else? What do you brothers think? Are people who fast all equal? Or are people who fast on different lengths, different wave levels, different capacities? Are they of different levels? What are your thoughts? هل كل من يصوم في درجة واحدة؟ ليش؟ هذا هو السؤال.
قد يكون عندي الإجابة بس
لا فكر فيه لا بأس. What do you guys think?
Is it because even other acts, such as read the Quran,
في حاجات بتنقص أنا آسف.
It's okay. He apologizes. Okay.
في حاجات بتنقص
مثل
الصفات بتنقص الصيام بتنقص
مثل
النظر إلى النساء مثلا
yeah.
إلى الشهوات.
So the brother mentioned, he reiterated your point, which is that there are certain things that make the fasting deficient. And among those things are the sins that we commit on a day-to-day basis. So if you're fasting, but you're committing sin, then naturally that fasting is going to have some levels of deficiency. Yeah? That fasting isn't going to be on its optimal level because you're still committing sin despite staying away from food or drink. You're not staying away from slander. You're not staying away from harming other people. You're not staying away from lowering your gaze from the opposite gender, etc. So Imam Ghazali, he then splits all of human beings into three categories when it comes to fasting. All human beings fall into one of three categories when it comes to fasting. The first is Sawmul Umum, fasting of the common people. Sawmul Umum. And he refers to this as fasting of the body. Why is the first level referred to as fasting of the body? This is the lowest level possible. It's where you've reached the minimal threshold to gain the reward for fasting, but you're extremely deficient when it comes to fulfilling its needs and conditions. Why is it called fasting of the body? Okay, it's physical, interesting. What else?
Because the body feels the hunger and the thirst.
Okay, good. What else? Okay, very good. Your inner desires are still being fulfilled. So Imam Ghazali mentions that the fasting of the body is something he refers to as كف البطن والفرج عن قضاء الشهوة. The only thing you're doing when you do fasting of the body is you're abstaining from food and sexual desires. It's outward abstinence only. It's not internal. Okay? So, and then he puts forth an analogy. It's a very profound analogy, something that we should really think about. There are so many lessons we can draw from it. He said, the person who falls into fasting of the body is like the one who goes to the bathroom, prepares himself to make wudu with the intention to pray, and then starts to make wudu without using water. He starts to make wudu without using water. Meaning the very thing he needs to optimize his ablution is the water itself. It's a fundamental source. But he draws away from the source and he wipes over his body parts, completing the motions without using the fundamental thing required to make it optimal and to make it at its highest level. And that's the water itself. So he's saying the purpose behind fasting is to foster God consciousness. It's to foster spiritual awareness. It's to embody spiritual positive behaviors. But all of these things are marginalized because this person is focused on just staying away from food, drink, and sexual desire. And all the other benefits that he could gain from fasting are overshadowed. It's like the one who makes wudu without water. It defeats the purpose. So it's like wiping over body parts to make wudu without water. And he's saying it's seemingly beneficial, but it lacks substance. And then he says, but the one who sees this person making wudu from a distance, he might not be able to tell that the water isn't running. That person would think this man's making wudu, because he's still putting water into his mouth, into his nose. He's wiping over his arms, he's wiping over his head. He's still maybe wiping over his feet and putting them into the sink. So seemingly it's a beneficial ritual act. But in essence, it lacks substance. It lacks the very thing that makes it spiritual. It lacks the very thing that makes it authentic. It lacks the very thing that makes it effective, and that's the water itself. The same with the people of this level. Their fasting lacks the internalization. It lacks the thought and the meaning and the purpose. If we're just fasting from morning till evening, we abstain from food and drink and sexual desire just so our fasting is authentic, it meets the conditions to be an Islamic fast, but we gain nothing else, then are we truly living in accordance to the purpose behind that fast? Are we actualizing that siyam? And how many people would fall into the first category, brothers? What do you think? It's a question we have to ask ourselves. Yeah, I know that's me for sure. The finger has to point towards ourselves first. Am I of that category? Is my fasting of this level, which I'm just meeting the threshold for it to be considered fasting, and I gain just a particle of reward? And we're happy with that. And why is Imam Ghazali making mention of this surface level of fasting? It's not to demean. It's not to put people down. It's not to belittle people's efforts. It's to put forth the statement that, are you happy with being ordinary when you could be extraordinary? Are you happy with gaining a fraction of reward when you could accumulate mountains worth of reward? Are you happy with being just a servant when you could be a beloved servant of Allah Azza wa Jal? Are you happy with having a distant relationship with God when you could have an established connection with Allah Azza wa Jal? So it's about being ambitious, being driven, wanting more, desiring to extract more from the fast, having more substance behind the fasting. And then he moves on to the second level, and he calls it صوم الخصوص. وأما صوم الخصوص فهو كف السمع والبصر واللسان واليد والرجل وسائر الجوارح عن الآثام. And as for fasting of the limbs, so the first was fasting of the body. The second level of fasting, ascending, is fasting of the limbs. It's abstinence of all the limbs from sin. You control the eyes, the tongue, the hands, the feet, and the other limbs. And this is the fasting of the righteous. Why does he mention the limbs per se? Why the limbs of so much significance that through adding the limbs to the list of things that you stop sin from consuming, it allows you to ascend to a higher level? Why is that? Okay, very good. That's one point. But why will the limbs testify against you?
Use them to do the action, don't you?
Okay, good. Something I mentioned just shortly ago. The limbs are the gateways. Yeah? The limbs are the gateways. It's how shaitan reaches us. It's how shaitan impacts us. The fundamental way how shaitan influences mankind is through one of these gateways that are mentioned within this report here. When you look at the opposite gender, there's a famous saying in English: what the eyes don't see, the heart is unaware of. What the eyes don't see, the heart is unaware of. If your eyes were never to fall upon sin, the heart would be completely oblivious to that particular sin. It's when you see sin, you touch sin, you take steps towards sin, you smell sin, you spew slander and vulgar speech, that's when you pave the path to ruin for yourself, and you empower the devil to exploit you in every way possible. By removing the protection, the fortification from those gateways that are being mentioned. These are the gateways that we are told to protect. These are the gateways that determine how safe we are as human beings. So Imam Ghazali is saying the main battlefield of shaitan are these gateways. Fasting strengthens resistance. And he said these people, because they are trying their utmost best to protect these gateways and to fortify them, they are so careful about their deeds being accepted. They're so careful about falling into sin. And he even goes as far as saying those who do fasting of the limbs, at iftar time, they're not even concerned with food consumption. All they're concerned is, oh Allah, accept my fasting. Because now they've made effort. Now they've they've struggled. They've put in effort. They've rolled up their sleeves and tucked into their fast with meaning and purpose. So now they want these sacrifices to be accepted. It's an analogy for us to understand is when the fasting of the limbs, okay, it's, imagine now you have a house, you leave it open throughout the entire day. And when you're alerted by a neighbor or a friend, or you receive a message in your community WhatsApp group that there are burglars within the neighborhood, you run and you lock your door. Yeah? These are people who are in the first level of fasting. There's no caution. There's no fortification. There's no preventative measure. There's no precautionary steps. The door is open. Anybody can enter that house and violate your belongings. Anybody can enter that house and foster insecurity. The second level is your door is locked throughout the door. You might even install CCTV. Yeah, you fortify that household. This is the example Imam Ghazali is conveying here. That are you looking after your houses more than you look after your inner and outer bodies? Yeah, shaitan can't physically enter your house, but he might be metaphysically inside your body, influencing you, driving you to evil, paving the path to ruin for you with every letter you utter and every step you take. So what defense system do we have in place? And it's the second level of fasting that activates this defense system. Because that's when you enter into conflict. What is conflict? Conflict is when two parties are involved. There can't be a one-sided conflict. Who are you in conflict with? The first level of fasting has no conflict. Because you're just abstaining from food and desire. You're not even on the battlefield. Imam Ghazali said that the real conflict occurs in level 2. That's when shaitan feels that you're harming him. He feels threatened. He feels you're attempting to weaken his influence. Why? Because you're guarding your limbs from sin. You're fortifying those gateways. The security guards stationed at those gateways to prevent any unwanted outsiders from entering and harming you. And then he goes on to say the third level of fasting. Sawmu khusus al-khusus. It's the highest form of fasting. And he says, صوم القلب عن الدنية والأفكار الدنيوية وكفه عما سوى الله عز وجل كليا. And he said the third is the heart abstains from lowly desires and worldly thoughts. And the heart is fully occupied with Allah and the hereafter. And this completes the connection with Allah through fasting. Shaitan is weakened and the soul is fortified. And the highest level of fasting is measured not by hunger or thirst, but where your heart resides itself. What's unique about this third level? And how does it differ from the first or second level? Any thoughts? He refers to this as the fasting of the heart. Yes?
So first, that's fasting of food and drink. Next, we fasting by nose and ear, hands and legs. And the second one, you have to stop that thinking about most bad things in the life.
Jazakallah, very good, mashallah, very good. What else do you brothers think? How does the third one, the fasting of the heart, relate to the previous levels of fasting? And how does it differ? What's unique about the third level?
Third one seems to like you're literally cut off the world.
You cut off from the world. Okay, what else?
First two is like physical.
Very good. The first one is purely physical. You're just focusing on physically abstaining from food and drink and sexual desire. The second one is predominantly physical, but there are tinges of spirituality involved. Okay? You're guarding your limbs from sin. You're weakening demonic influence. There's a level of spiritual interaction there, but it's minimal. The third one, where it merges physical and spiritual abstinence. But Imam Ghazali, he puts forth a thought-provoking statement. And it's almost an answer as to what the third level is and where it fits in among these three levels. Very interesting. He says, كم من صائم مفطر وكم من مفطر صائم. He said many people eat while they fast and many people fast while they eat. Which one are you? What does that mean?
أنا فاهم كم من مؤمن صائم.
That كم من صائم مفطر وكم من مفطر صائم.
أنا فاهم كم من صائم مفطر اللي هو يكون صايم زي احنا بنقولها مغزة صوم الأولاد.
جميل.
فهو يعني نهاره يحكي عن الناس
استنى في المغرب يأذن وبصير يحكي مش عاجبه صيامه وبصير يعني الشهوات مش ملتزم يعني صوم يعني من غير.
So Brother Hilal said that the first one is quite understandable. Many eat while fasting, meaning you're fasting but you're not staying away from unlawful actions. Yeah. So even though you're fasting, you eat. Yeah. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts with this? That's his opinion on it. So we have many eat while fasting and many fast while eating.
ممكن تكون كم من مفطرا صائم يعني كم من شخص مسموح له ياكل لكن مش ملاقي ياكل.
طيب. So he says maybe people have the opportunity to eat but they don't want to eat out of love for Allah. I'm not validating these opinions by the way, I'm just sharing them with you. None of them are correct so far. What do you guys think? ها؟ ليس صحيحا. أنا أعرض عليهم حتى من باب يعني What do you brothers think? Many eat while fasting and many fast while eating.
Eat while fasting, is that like who is fasting to reaping the rewards? They eat whilst fasting. So they're fasting, but the souls are eating like they're getting the rewards.
Okay, that's an interesting observation.
They're getting
MashaAllah.
the substance of fasting.
MashaAllah.
The sustenance of fasting.
No, I like that. Very nice, Hamad. Excellent.
التنتين غلط ولا واحد غلط عندك؟ عندي التنتين غلط ولا واحد؟
الاثنين غلط.
الحمد لله.
لا الحمد لله لا. Mujib, what do you think?
Basically, what Ahmad said, metaphorically consuming the good or consuming the bad, fasting, while consuming human actions, and the other one is not fasting, but still avoiding them.
Okay, interesting. I'll repeat it one more time with different phraseology. Okay. So many people are in essence eating, but they're actually fasting. And many people are in essence fasting, but they're actually eating.
Is that while they're eating still in worship or while they're fasting?
Okay, interesting. You know, if you kind of merge everyone's thoughts and observations, you can actually build something from it. You've all made some, apart from Ahmed, everyone's made some decent contributions. Ahmed, you just come from Umrah, I'm expecting spiritual insights. Come on, brother. The Sufi position. What do you brothers think? So many are actually eating, okay, while fasting. And others you're under the impression they're fasting, but they're actually eating. Go ahead.
They're physically fasting, but they're still doing the other impermissible things.
Okay, good. So the first one is that many eat while fasting is that despite the fact that they are fasting, they're still eating because they're engaging in lawful action. That's what we've spoken of throughout the course of the lesson, isn't it? You might be fasting from dusk till dawn, but not a person walks by you except that you make their flaws apparent, you backbite them, you slander them, okay? You might get angry and you might even spew vulgar language. Yeah? This is a person who, despite the fact that he's fasting, he's eating. That's quite clear. The second one is many fast while eating. How can you eat but still fast at the same time?
They've got a lawful reason, but they're still doing other acts of piety.
Maybe he's doing bad things.
But then they wouldn't be eating though.
No, they would be because they're ill, but they still can do good.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, still doing good either.
Okay, what else? What do you guys think?
Maybe doing bad things.
Okay, doing bad things. What else? Aj, what do you think? Mr. English lit here. Come on, should have. You studied Shakespearean literature, brother.
It's not relevant anymore.
So Imam Ghazali is the second part, which is many fast while eating, is that he's trying to say that if you fast in Ramadan while embodying the mentioned spiritual behavior, even outside of Ramadan, when you have your breakfast, you have your dinner, you have your lunch, you go out to take with family and friends, you're sitting in the mosque and drinking tea, your heart is still fasting. Because you'd undergone Ramadan in the proper fashion. So you don't allow your gateways to be affected by sin. You don't allow the protection and the fortification to wither away. You don't allow your eyes to lust over the opposite gender. You don't allow your feet and your hands to take steps towards wrong and sin and filth. So even though you're physically eating, your heart is still fasting. So the third level, according to some of those who explained Imam Ghazali's works, is nothing to do with Ramadan. It's about carrying the spirit of Ramadan beyond the month. That because you fast with so much purpose, meaning and dedication in Ramadan, you gain the third level, which is you fast with your heart outside the month, even when you're not fasting. Because the meaning of fasting is abstinence. So you embody spiritual abstinence to such a degree that anything that displeases Allah, your heart doesn't even attempt to draw near towards it. So you become a person who is in a constant state of fasting. So he speaks about fasting as a spiritual behavior more than a ritualistic action. So as opposed to thinking fasting as I wake up in the morning, I eat my suhoor, then I go to the masjid. There's a process to this ritualistic action that we carry out. He's saying no. He's saying that once you've done that in Ramadan properly, while taking the internal niyyah-making process into consideration, while optimizing your actions, while being careful about your gateways, you reach a stage where in your day-to-day life, while you walk, you go to work, you eat, you speak, your heart's in a constant state of fasting because you've embodied the behavior of spiritual abstinence. Okay, what are the takeaways? Number one is to check the intention consistently. All the three lessons are interlinked. First, we spoke about the intention-making process. Then we spoke about the optimization of actions. And now we've spoken about fasting. But the intention ties them all together. Because without the intention, these actions are void of purpose, worth, and value. What gives us value and integrity as believing people is the niyyah itself. And that's where some of the Salaf would say that many of us would carry out a magnificent action, and in the eyes of Allah, it would be insignificant. Why? Because the niyyah wasn't produced properly. So even though it's materially big, building a mosque, paying for the full conversion of a masjid, paying hundreds of pounds in charity, it's materially a big contribution. But in your scales, it's very insignificant. Why? Because the niyyah wasn't there. And then he said, but there are some actions we would do that were insignificant in size, but they became grandeur in our scales. That penny you gave to charity, insignificant amount materially speaking, but your intention was solely to please Allah. Because that's all you possessed at that moment in time. That niyyah is going to take you further than any magnificent action. The second is fasting is more than abstaining from food. So true fasting is where the body, the limbs, and the heart all together are involved in the fasting process. So we have to make sure we're not just people who fast with the body. We're fasting with our limbs. We're fasting with our hearts. We're actually thinking about our day-to-day actions. We spoke in the previous lessons about some of the actions that we are going to do habitually in Ramadan. What are the intentions that we can quantify? What are the intentions we should be making for those actions to optimize those day-to-day habitual actions? So fasting is much more than just abstinence. Okay? It's much more than just abstaining from physical things like food and drink. It's about bringing out the best version of yourself. It's about cleansing yourself spiritually, mentally, psychologically. And lastly, is to carry Ramadan spirit all year round. The third level, which is fasting with the heart, there's a push and a drive for us to take that Ramadan spirit and behavior and to carry it throughout the entire year. But for us to go beyond Ramadan, we have to first strive and struggle and perfect this system in Ramadan. Only if in Ramadan we can undergo the proper fasting process through fasting with our limbs, not just staying away from food and drink and that's it, through properly fasting, being mindful of Allah Azza wa Jal, understand why we're doing actions, to think about Him in privacy, think about Him in public, to know He's watching us at all times, to fortify these gateways. It's very, very easy in the day and age we live in to stumble upon sin. Just scrolling with your hands to TikTok and Instagram, your hands are taking part in that potential sin you may be falling into in the next few seconds. You're scrolling, and you come across a woman who's revealing herself. There you've weakened the gateway of the eyes. You've weakened the gateway of the hands. All your limbs are involved in that sin. And this is when shaitan, he exploits. And that's why the Salaf would often say that there was never a moment where we were stopped from waking up at night to pray, or where we felt our anger would increase, except it was due to a sin that we committed privately. Stumbling upon something with our eyes, physically committing some form of sin, verbally assaulting other people. These aren't just things that are affecting others. In fact, if you take a deep look at it, these things affect us more than other people. Although you're committing dhulm upon someone else by physically assaulting them, although you're hurting somebody's feelings by insulting them verbally, but you're weakening your own gateways. You're allowing shaitan to exploit you because that protection from that particular gateway, it's withered away. Shaitan enters and he roams around within your system freely. The demonic influence, it intensifies. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to connect to Allah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who fast in this month with meaning, purpose and determination. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and reflections, brothers. وأقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وأتوب إليه. I'll pass it on to the brothers for their reflections.